I'd like to call this meeting to order. We can start with roll call.
Chair Peterson.
Here.
Vice Chair Butler.
Here.
Commissioner Quisette. Commissioner Watson.
Here.
The Secretary Howard.
Thank you. Go to approval of the agenda with a couple questions. There were some questions about the timing of the packet and whether the packets were available at town hall. So I want to ask the commissioners as we move forward in the agenda, has transparency been fulfilled in both spirit and deed? Do you have the information needed to make a decision? Did you have sufficient preparation time for considering the decision? And then, of course, our overriding what is fair and what is nice. So, food for thought before we start. We have an agenda in front of us. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I move that we approve the agenda as written.
Is there a second? Any comments? Commissioners? Motion's been made and seconded for approval of agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So our first action and presentation is appointment of officers, which happen at the beginning of each year. Right now, I serve as chair, Mary serves as vice chair, and Lynn serves as secretary. And I'd be open to a motion for any kind of arrangement so we can fulfill those officers.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
If you, 2-8-20, organization of the zoning board of adjustment says that it shall be each year, but 2-6-40, appointment of offices, it says the term of office, including the chair, shall be for 2 years for the planning commission.
Oh, okay. So that sounds, is that your understanding? I'm asking the clerk and town staff.
I was under the impression that at one of your last planning commission meetings, there was a conversation that included the town attorney. And that you all determined that officers were which is why it's on there.
Yeah.
So the ordinance is 2-6-40. Does someone want to look that up?
I have no internet.
Oh, well, I have it downloaded, and I copied that off. I mean, I have the.
So my understanding is that you assumed the chairmanship.
It was a temporary basis until we got back on schedule, and that's my understanding of it.
To replace Monica.
To be on schedule, to replace Monica. We had officers, and then schedule typically we call for officers to be appointed at this meeting,
Okay.
the first meeting in January.
Okay.
So the
that's
next
good.
appointment of officers would happen in 2 years.
But
Thank you.
unless a mayor is the chair, because then if you are no longer in office, or either of the, and then that would have to be done again.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I'll entertain a motion for officers, appointment of officers.
Well, I move that Mr. Knudsen retain his position and that Mayor Backman retain hers.
And I'm a secretary.
Oh, and that Lynn remains secretary.
Yeah, she remains because she's under the 2-year thing.
Yeah.
The 2-year plan.
It'd be nice if someone who wasn't an officer.
Okay, but like the second best example. All right.
Thank you. Okay, the motion's been made and seconded for myself serving as chair, for Mary Bachringer serving as vice chair, and for Lynn Howe as secretary. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. So our second item on the agenda is a master plan status update from Phoenix Rising Resources.
Yes. Okay. Marissa is also online, although there's a little bit of intermittent service. We're excited to be continuing on with a comprehensive plan. We had a good meeting with the town administrator and extended the deadline. I was unable to print that off today because the print shop stuff was down, because the internet was down. But Stefan has the approved timeline in his email, and I'm hoping to share that with you. Essentially, we're trying to extend this to June, I believe, 6th. And with several planned meetings with the planning commission and one public workshop between now and then. We're also going to be submitting a work order change for some additional funds to support the bringing on of Shay, who helped with the housing needs assessment or led the housing needs assessment. Because this plan now requires more technical planning expertise than we initially understood the project would require. And some more time with map creation than was initially identified in the original scope. So we will be submitting that by the end of this week for you guys to take a look at and approve or negotiate with. That's the update.
I can't even pull the schedule.
Let me see if I.
Essentially, we want to break up the workshops into a number of elements. So each element in the comprehensive plan will be grouped either with others or by itself and presented to the planning commission for feedback. And then we'll be in all public meetings. The one meeting we hope to make more like a public workshop and less like a planning commission meeting is the one on the future land use map. We're hoping to host that at the Blue Sage and have a lot of beautiful maps printed up on the wall and a lot of the layers that can help show the town things like infrastructure connectivity, gateways to town, natural hazards, wildlife corridors, things that we heard were of importance from the public and from the town in our work thus far. And then for folks to be able to think a little bit about where and how future land use might look in Paonia. So that will be the first one. That'll be a big one. And then the next one will be on infrastructure, which will include water. And that will be another big one.
I have it in my report, so I was able to pull that out at least.
Yeah, and I have it too.
Okay.
How much you guys know or don't know. So I'm just.
I think it's really good to be comprehensive because a number of members of the community are here and they'd probably like to hear this.
Okay.
Yeah.
So water and infrastructure will be on the agenda. And what date is that one? We didn't change that one. We did change that
I believe
one.
it's 3/6, March 6th, water sewer.
That one got changed. So that's on 3/13 will be the draft element presentation of the Plan Commission. That's infrastructure, water, sewer treatment, urban forest, sanitation, and resource recovery. And that will be a public hearing.
Yes.
So to hear that element and receive input.
It just meant I don't think we're gonna have the same level of public workshop on that one. Is that correct?
That's right. So the big public workshop that we're looking to host, it was a Blue Sage, is on 2/28, and that's that future land use public input meeting, which we're also going to consider that as a public hearing because we're taking and receiving feedback. But it's not, it's not as formalized. We're eliciting feedback from residents and businesses at this public hearing. And that's 2/28. 3/13 is that draft element for infrastructure for water, sewer, and treatment. 4/3 was the next draft element presentation. That's transportation, governance, and community participation. That will be considered a public hearing. We're looking for feedback from residents. And then 5/1 is a draft element presentation for growth framework, economic development, parks, recreation, and trails for a final draft presentation with public hearing, a comment on June 5th. Is that right?
Correct. So, any questions?
Any questions from the commissioners? Any questions from the public? I'll just make a comment myself that I'm really pleased to hear Shay joining the team because she did exemplary work along with Andrew in our affordable housing plan. And so I think it'll just boost and make your efforts even stronger than they would have been anyway.
Thank you, Dave. And yes, we're very happy that Jay is going to put some hours towards, making sure everything is as comprehensive as possible.
And of course, approval of the funds and the negotiation, that would go to the council, not to the planning commission. We would just do this part.
So and as a point of clarification, I'm working with DOLA to take the funds that weren't exhausted with that grant for the housing needs assessment and move that towards ours. So whatever funds are there, I think it was, there's still some funds left over that we didn't exhaust, and move those over into towards this housing element and for this comprehensive master plan.
Yeah, because we will be integrating the housing element into the comprehensive plan fairly completely, and that's gonna be a large chunk of work. Yeah, so that we're excited. We are gonna have some additional contractors come on to support various roles, given that this timeline has extended longer. So there may be some other subs that you will see on there who are supporting, given that other team members have work that they had planned for that this would not extend into. But the majority of the team is staying on, and we were excited to work with you on getting this finished.
Great.
Okay, thank you all so much. Good to see you.
Thanks for the update.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. It's a public hearing, an application for a minor subdivision of property at 831 Highway 153, in Colorado 81428 by West Elk Land and Hawks. So I will now open the public hearing on the application submitted by West Elk Land and Hawks LLC for the minor subdivision of property located 841 Highway 133, Paonia, Colorado, 81428, and for the rezoning of same property from medium density residential R2 to estate residential E1. The purpose of this hearing is to provide a public forum for all interested parties who wish to comment on these applications before the Planning Commission. If you wish to testify as part of this hearing, please sign the roster at the back table by the door if you wish to speak. If you haven't already, we have a minute to do that. First, we'll have a presentation by town staff. Next, there will be a presentation by the applicant. After these two presentations, we will allow members of the public to speak for up to 5 minutes. All testimony must be presented at the lectern after you give your full name and address, and I swear you in. Please do not repeat points made by others, but it's fine to say that you agree or disagree with a comment previously made. Please direct all your comments to the Planning Commission and not to town staff or to the applicant. After receiving public comments, we'll allow the applicant and town staff an opportunity to respond and answer any questions raised by public comments. I will then turn the matter over to the Planning Commission, and commissioners may ask questions of anyone who testify. We generally will not ask questions during the presentations. Finally, I'll close the public hearing, and the Planning Commission will discuss the matter and may take some kind of action. Once the public hearing is closed, no further comment from the applicant or public will be taken. However, the commission may ask for advice from the town attorney. Public hearings are recorded for the public record. So do we have proper notification?
Yes.
And do any of the commissioners have disclosures?
So it would be ex parte communications.
So if people in the audience didn't hear that, if there's any ex parte communication, that means if any members of the commission had individual discussions about this matter with any of the applicants, they need to disclose that at this time. Hearing none. Would the town administrator please present the staff presentation?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to share screen, but it's just what's in your packets that we'll go over. So, my review of this is for a minor subdivision, not for rezoning. I know that there's a public notice that said rezoning. The only information I'm going to give you tonight for your consideration is for a subdivision. So for splitting this parcel into 3 total. So this is a minor subdivision because it's under 7 splits. If it were over, then it would be a major subdivision, which creates more review time and is a little bit harder for you guys to consider. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at a minor subdivision, but I can't administratively split it because they're not parallel to each other. That would be the first criteria. So it has to go to the Plan Commission for an actual public hearing and review because of the way it's situated. If you wanted to see how it's situated, here's a larger subdivision and plat that you can look at. We're talking one lot that's being split up into 3 lots, and that's what we're considering today. Going down their checklist, they have provided the town with their application fee, a new or a preliminary legal description of the property. They've provided proof of ownership, and a location improvement certificate by Wilmore & Company is in front of us, and then a narrative statement that they've also provided in your packet describing fire protection, emergency access, flood protection, and proposed vehicular access. You'll also see in there something from Chief Kinser from the Paoli Fire Department that says that he's been working with the applicant to find something that works for fire protection, and they've met that criteria as well. And then any restrictive covenants that they may have are also contemplated. You'll see things discussed about like water rights and things like that. Those were conditions that I had asked them to start working on for this subdivision. So they had a preliminary meeting with me as town administrator, and some of the things that they have in here that they've also contemplated, such as obtaining a general use well permit, engineered plans for their domestic well water system, and then their HOA guidelines and how they will work a shared easement or access easement. Those are things that I asked them to start considering should the split happen. And they've given that information to us to start that contemplation. All we're looking at right now is the subdividing this piece into 3 different ones. So it's the end of my.
And the zoning issue.
I didn't contemplate zoning, and looking in their application, I don't recall seeing zoning. I know that we had publicly noticed it as zoning from R2 to residential estate. That typically comes separate after subdivision. So it was noticed that way. If you want to proceed that direction, you can. But first, the first item of business is whether or not we want to subdivide it.
Thank you.
And as I said, in their packet, they have provided all of the documentation they need.
Are there any other staff comments?
I'm going to add on to the public noticing requirements, not only what hasn't run in the paper for 4 weeks, but each adjacent property owner was given a certified letter. We did receive those certified letter green certificates back, I think last week. It took a while to get them, but we have all of them. So every adjacent property owner, including those outside of town limits, were also notified. We did have a couple of adjacent property owners come in and look at their application to see what they were looking to do.
Any other comments, staff comments needed?
I don't have any. That's it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, our town attorney gave us something to contemplate. So he is sick, so he couldn't be here, but he did say that it doesn't need to be resolved at the moment, but the application contemplates shared access to Highway 133 by way of a shared drive occupying a portion of all 3 proposed lots. If approved, the subdivision will authorize the individual sale of each lot. If the lots come into separate ownership, then the separate owners will require easements from each other to enforce their access rights across the 2 properties. While the access is shown and labeled as an easement on the plat, the plan itself cannot create private easements. You have to have a different instrument for that. Moreover, the easements cannot be created until the lots come into separate ownership due to the doctrine of merger. One cannot grant an easement to oneself across property one owns. So the subdivision has to happen for this grant, for an easement to be granted as well. So he gives a couple of options for this to be contemplated. In his opinion, the best ways in his opinion are to require the applicant to create 2 additional limited purpose LLCs into which to place the 2 of the 3 new lots to artificially create separate ownership by which to create the easements, or to approve the application conditionally that the seller grant the appropriate access easements upon sale of the subject lot. So if they don't have 2 LLCs created, that's fine. We can conditionally, or the plan commission could conditionally approve the subdivision that the seller grant appropriate access easements upon sale of each subject lot. Most municipalities that I've worked with go for that second where there's a conditional approval, knowing that if one of these lots sells and there isn't that easement for that access easement available, the subdivision doesn't exist anymore. But that's a condition. That would be my recommendation as well, is to conditionally approve should there be a sale with an access easement. That is it for staff.
Last call for staff.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant or applicant's representative please come up to the podium, state your name, address, and take the oath.
David Warren. My address is 40760 Drury Creek Drive.
Okay, thank you. And do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes, I do.
And please make your presentation.
As I said, my name is David Warren. I am a co-owner of the property we're going to talk about tonight with Al, Bill, and Alice and Elliot.
Could you speak?
There's a problem with, the public can't hear you, David.
Okay, so my name is David Warren. I'm a co-owner of the property we're speaking about this evening, along with Al, Bill, and Alice and Elliot. So I wanted to take a minute just to be okay with you.
You need to speak up some more.
Well, maybe if we move the podium over to the side and you're talking.
Projecting this way.
Projecting
Yeah.
both ways,
Yeah.
yeah. Is that okay, Dave?
Sure.
It's on wheels. Podium's on wheels.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm losing my voice as it is, that's why. And I'm very soft spoken, so. If it's okay with everyone, I'd like to share a brief history of the property and the project as a whole with everyone here tonight. Our property is part of a larger project called Riverbank. It was planned as phase 2 of a mixed-use R2 neighborhood. In 2007, we were annexed into town to secure water taps for the project. Just before the final plat was approved, the economy took a downturn in 2008 and the project was canceled. Property was then divided into 2 parcels and our ownership retained the northern 14 acres of the property. From 2011 to 2021, many of you might have known we grew hops on the property for 9 acres worth for 11 years. And after closing the farm, we decided we wanted to move forward and pursue developing the property. Due to the ongoing water moratorium, we planned on de-annexing the hops property in order to pursue drilling a domestic well. During the annexation process with the town in 2007, the town trustees passed a resolution allowing us to de-annex if the town couldn't provide us with water taps. And I have a copy of that resolution with me. In the fall of 2022, we met with interim town manager Leslie Kuzmeyer regarding a de-annexation application. And she assured us that after confirming with the town attorney that We could have both a domestic well and state-approved septic systems for each lot within the town boundaries, as she recommended not to de-annex. She also said our property would be best suited for estate zoning, which was a new designation for us, and it did make sense when we read about the description of that. Based on that meeting, we decided to move forward with a minor subdivision within town limits with a state zoning classification. So I kind of, looking at the application, I see basically four major components to it. I see the water component, the sewer component, the access, as well as the fire protection. So I kind of wanted to go through all those, let you know kind of where we were at this point. Soon after that meeting in December of 2022, we obtained a well permit from the state and drilled a well in January of 23. So it's about a year to this month that we drilled a well. In order for the state to approve the well for domestic use, it must include an augmentation plan. This past October, our augmentation plan was approved by the state water court and our decree was issued. Our final step before receiving our general use well permit, and what that basically is allowing our well to be used for domestic water, is to finalize our water contracts for the augmentation plan. So I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with how augmentation plans and water contracts work. So I have kind of a brief definition, and it kind of dovetails in exactly it pertains to our project. So an augmentation plan is a Colorado Water Court approved document which is designed to protect existing water rights by replacing water depleted in a new project. Since our new well is a junior water right, entities with downstream senior water rights need to be protected in the event of a drought year. For our project, senior water right holders include the Short Ditch, which is located on the North Fork between Ione and Hotchkiss, and Redlands Water and Power Company on the Lower Gunnison, which is located just about 10 miles upstream of Grand Junction. If we are experiencing a dry year and these entities place a call on their water rights, we would need to place a small percentage of our annual water use back into the river to meet that call. To supply this water, we are purchasing water contracts with Lost Lake Slough, which is off of Kepler Road, the Lost Lake, and Blue Mesa Reservoir. So if there's a call on the Short Ditch, the water has to come upstream of the Short Ditch in order for them to be able to utilize it. And so we're working on a water contract with the North Fork Water Conservation District to obtain water from them, from Lost Lake to take care of Short Ditch. Now for the other call, which is much further down the Gunnison, we're working with the Bureau of Reclamation, and that water will come out of Blue Mesa Reservoir, down through the Gunnison Gorge, through Delta, and out to service those needs there. So since our augmentation plan has already been approved and a decree has been issued, basically once these contracts are finalized, which we're hoping in the next few weeks, then we would go ahead and apply for our general use well permit. Right now we have what they call an observation or a monitoring well, which basically enables us to drill the well, determine the flow rate, the gallons per minute, and determine the water quality that can be tested, and a plan can be designed from that. So this last little piece is the basically securing the contracts for the augmentation plan, which we have a water attorney we hired that's taking care of that right now. So that's where the water stands. In terms of the septic systems, in our meeting with Leslie, she confirmed with Public Works Director Corey Henniger, who was also attending that meeting, that since our property is located more than 400 feet from the sewer main, we were exempt from connecting to the town sewer system, and that we could use state-approved septic systems would be permitted for each lot. And so Corey got a map out. He did some measurements. We actually talked with Stephanie about it as well. And it was determined that we were well beyond the 400 feet. And so with a state engineered septic system within county standards, as long as the property is an acre as a minimum, those would be allowed. And so with our minor subdivision, we're looking at 6.5 acres for one parcel, 4 acres for another, and 3.5 for the other parcel there. And there is some notes for, I'm not sure the terminology is, within the town's regulations that talk about being 400 feet or more away from a town sewer main. As far as the fire protection, we have worked closely with the Paonia VFD and have incorporated all of the recommendations into our subdivision plan. So please refer to that letter from Chief Kinzer. They came out a number of times with some of their deputies, and basically we looked at the whole project and they made the recommendations and we adopted them. I think, you know, the most important one is they requested our shared driveway with the Land's End Foundry is 15 feet wide right now. And they've requested an additional 10 feet on the driveway to create an opening 25 feet off of Highway 133. And that's to improve the ease and safety of fire trucks as well as vehicles entering and exiting the highway from both directions. In addition to that, CDOT will also require a concrete apron across that 25-foot access width, which will join the existing pavement on Highway 133 and extend into the shared access. And this apron will be constructed to CDOT specifications. As far as access, since our driveway is shared with the Land's End Foundry, CDOT required a traffic study to determine if vehicle traffic for the two properties was acceptable for our access location. CDOT approved the study and issued us an access permit. And then the estate zoning. The estate zoning is an ideal classification for the property based on our Farmers Ditch irrigation water irrigation system, lot sizes, and location on the edge of town. So we have senior water rights from the Farmers Ditch. We also have an engineered irrigation system for the 10 acres that was established years ago when we first got the house going. That was accomplished through a federal grant through the NRCS. And that covers 10 acres of the property. As I mentioned, the lot size is 4 to 6 acres, our prime location in the edge of town. And that's been able to accommodate all types of livestock and crops property. So in summary, we'd like to stay within town limits. In doing so, also would benefit the town. There would be tax revenue from the homes and the property. All the homes would be built to town building codes, would be revenue through various permitting fees during the construction process. The town would not be responsible for water, sewer, and road maintenance or trash service. And the town would maintain its northern border. Estate zoning would provide a balance of residential development while maintaining historical, agricultural, open space, and uses. Our minor subdivision application has met all the criteria prior to the town. We have followed all town guidelines and regulations for domestic water, sewer, fire protection, and access. We're asking the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the town trustees this evening to approve our minor subdivision with estate zoning contingent on 3 components that need to be completed. And those 3 components are in the packet. And the first one being securing that general use well permit that we talked about with water contracts. The second one, as Stefan mentioned, was completing engineered plans for our domestic water well and delivery plan to each lot. And we're currently working with an engineering firm in Grand Junction to complete the plan. And then lastly, developing an HOA guidelines, which will consist of a simple agreement for shared irrigation system use, maintenance, and improvements. We're not really going to do anything more than HOA other than just to sort out the water. So everybody can use the water together. We have a settling pond, we have a pump house, and then we have an underground pressurized system that basically has zones for the whole property. But people will need to. And the way we divided the property with the lots, we made sure that the header lines that go across the field in all these different areas reflect that people can utilize those zones. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I think it was our understanding that we were going to be applying for not only subdivision tonight, but also the zoning. So that was more of a misunderstanding with that. So it's just the.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Well, Stefan has said that right now we're just talking about the subdivision this evening. It was our understanding that we were going to be talking about the estate zoning as well as the subdivision tonight. So if it's just the subdivision, that's fine. But it's just something I want to clarify.
And they're 2 very separate issues. One is subdividing property, and then the other would be rezoning.
Anything else from the applicants? The other 2 silent partners? Okay.
Very silent.
They're well versed though, well versed.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
We'll now open the public public comment portion of the hearing. And I'll ask each speaker to clearly state their full name and address for the record. I'll be asking them the same question. Do you swear to tell the truth in this matter? And would you do the time for us?
Yes, I'll have to use my phone. It's okay.
Is there anything further from town staff before we start that part? Okay, so is there anyone who wishes to make a comment about this application? Please.
Really hard to hear what's going on here. I bet it is. I'll try to do better.
So name, address, and then I'm gonna ask you to swear in.
Richard Schmidt, SCHMIDT, 323 Onarga Avenue, Paonia, Colorado.
Do you swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So mostly I have a couple of clarification questions about the process. The first one being when the town annexed this property and then I hear it was sold and divided into two parcels, was that done as a minor subdivision? How was that divided? Because if that was done as a minor subdivision, then they can't, according to what I've read, and I don't know the answer, they might not be able to subdivide it again as a minor subdivision, because that's the first requirement on their of subdivisions, minor subdivision. I don't even know the difference between a minor and a major subdivision, but it just came to my attention because I was dealing with something like this myself. The other comment that I have, or question that I have, is when this property was annexed, I thought the whole purpose was to bring it into the town. So I'm curious if there's a full easement through the lower property that does connect right to the town roads. Is there a full easement available for not only utilities, but also for road access? It seems kind of odd to me that you wouldn't have an access the way that they were planning on doing originally with the riverbank from the town property, from the town roads, and not just from the highway. I'm not sure what requirements the town is under to provide any services, if this is subdivided the way it's set up. But it seems like there should be a road coming from the other road. There should be two accesses to get to that property. And so the next comment I have is about the utilities, which I thought one of the points of annexing a property into town was to provide utilities to the property. So if they're gonna apply for septic and well and sell all these properties, and if there's any problems down the line, does the town have any responsibility in supplying water, say, because that would be the biggest one, to the property? And is there easement available on the lower property or not? Because I didn't see it in the plans. I couldn't tell what it was. The sewer line deal, it says if you're over 400 feet, according to a presentation, I'm curious where that sewer line is. Because I thought that when they set up the annexation, they brought the sewer line really close to that property. I could be wrong. I don't know the answer to that question either. But I thought that sewer line, they did a whole deal getting ready for that thing. And then if they divide the property and take away the lower half, is that? Is that for me or no?
If you could finish this thought.
Oh, am I done?
Yeah.
I have a lot more questions that I'd like to ask, but those are just comments. Thanks.
Bill Bruner, 608 Second Street in Paonia.
You swear to tell the truth in this matter?
Yes, it is.
Thank
Well, it sounds like a plan for an excellent state zone these people have come up with it. They have every right in the world to ask you to let this happen. I think, number one, you have no obligation to approve it. And the most important thing, the most important question is, what does the town want to see happen? And it seems to me it's one of the only growth areas in the town. And it's already zoned appropriately for this kind of an affordable housing type development, which this commission has been involved in a lot of buzz about affordable housing. And I think you should consider that upmost in your mind when you think about this. And it's kind of being presented as a rock and a hard place that if you don't approve it, they'll just de-annex and do it in the county. And I don't think that's really maybe the way it works. There may be a resolution that they could de-annex at some point in the future, but I don't think a resolution is really a binding thing. All it takes is another resolution, and that resolution is evaporated. And should the town council approve a de-annexation, that would be subject to a referendum, I believe. And I think if there was a formal objection from the town to the county would be slow to approve a thing like this. And I'm not sure how the rule is actually written or enforced, but I thought the rule with the county was that if you were within a service area of a municipality, you were stuck with their service. And in that case, it would be just like everybody else that's stuck with this moratorium, which I, as an aside, would urge everybody to work on it. It's been slow to get started. And I believe one of the things that this board has just approved is a portion destined for the comprehensive plan that recommends doing away with the state zoning. To me, the gated community is the last thing this town needs. I'd hate to see it. Just my own personal opinion. Thanks.
Christina Patterson, Price Road. Yes. So just as far as I would like to speak to the timing of this, because we really only had 2 days to review this packet and it was pretty dense. And I really wanted to talk to the water commissioner and CDOT, and CDOT seemed comprehensive in what they presented in the packet as I read it, but I was pretty rushed. And there was no internet for the last 4 hours at my house and here. So it was really it was tight to figure it out. I wanted to get a hold of the water commissioner because there's all sorts of springs and water lines and ditches right in that area. And I never got none of my neighbors I never got noticed as far as what the ramifications of putting wells in for 3 or 6 households. I'm not sure what that number is exactly. So I really sort of wanted to triple check with that and see where that was at. And I'm sure they did their due diligence. I just didn't know. Nobody in our neighborhood was contacted as far as water and water rights go with that well. Also, my neighbor, Arabella Beavers, said she was never noticed on that. And she is she butts up against that property. And she said she never got a notification of this, what was going on. So normally in the packet, in my experience, there's always been the notifications posted in the packet. So you could see who was notified. And I didn't see that. So that's it. It seems like also there's a master plan coming down here with we're talking about zoning, we're talking about housing, we're talking about everything, and seems like, I know you've been in the works for a long time, but it's like, right now, everything's crunching, and it's like, shouldn't we wait to see what's happening with the master plan and everybody's input, and then make development determinations? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the commission? Does the applicant wish to offer further comment?
I will, give it a shot. I'm Allison Elliott, 32,
Address.
316 Oak Avenue.
Swear to tell the truth in this matter.
I do. Well, I appreciate the detail and concern that the previous speakers have had, my fellow community members. We do want to remember that the property was originally one large piece of property, and it was part of the Riverbank community whole neighborhood plan that was shelved in 2008. And we understand that lower property, the southern portion of the property, has the greater potential for growth because it is closer to the water and sewer lines. The northern property is all those distances that we talked about from water and sewer lines. And we have talked to the owners of those properties about potential for water at access easement. And we have not secured that with them because that property, I believe, is still for sale. And so they weren't willing to, from what I remember in conversations with them, they understood that it would be a good idea to have some of these things secured, but they didn't want to tie their hands about future sale of that property, which is, again, why we have, I think, you can understand why we've taken the route that we have, because we don't know what's going to happen to that southern property. And we looked at our options of what we could possibly do with that northern property. And we have discovered that, well, what we've presented is the best case scenario that we have in staying in the town and accomplishing all of the, the directives that the town wants to accomplish as far as water and sewer and safety and access. So that was our guideline.
Thank you. Any other comments from the applicant?
Oh, the other thing too, as far as estate planning estate zoning, is that we do have very good irrigation water rights. And we felt that with those water rights, it made sense to make that property available to continue to be small farm situations with housing available to those small farm situations. So estate zoning would look like a very good option.
Thank you. Anything further from town staff?
I'm looking up the one property that was being discussed, and I'm just to be clear, what our clerk did for notice was a report from the county assessor's office for all properties that were within 200 feet of this property line or touching it. And the person mentioned wasn't on that report. So looking at GIS, I don't know if it touches the property or not.
Now, between the northern and southern, people get mixed up. We actually don't have, but the foundry on the west side and the high school on the east side.
So I don't see where they're actually touching that property line.
I will now close the public comment portion of the public hearing. That's just the public comment portion. The public hearing is continuing now. Before we turn to commissioner questions and deliberation, I want to state that the documents included as part of the record for this public hearing include all application materials submitted by the applicant, all materials included in planning commission packets, all written referral and public comments received regarding the application, the notice of hearings, and the town subdivision and zoning ordinances. Does anyone have any objection to the inclusion of these items in the record? I see no objections, questions from the commissioners who would like to begin.
I have a question. Richard brought up the question of if it was a minor subdivision and can it be subdivided again? And I'd like some clarification on that because.
Okay, so let me get the attention of town staff. Sorry. So that's okay. You were interrupted. So if you can repeat your question.
So Richard brought up the point that when it was subdivided was it subdivided as minor subdivision? And if so, could it then be subdivided again?
So the question becomes, at the time of subdivision, was it within town limits or was it still within the county?
That's not the question. It's more.
Was it, a major subdivision or a minor subdivision?
When it was subdivided in 2007, it was a.
No, it was annexed in 2000. Yeah.
And then 2008,
And
the
then there was a
original.
subdivision
When
after it
the
was in
first
town
two
limits.
lots.
It was supposedly divided into two properties in 2008 when, the economy crashed, the housing market crashed.
So that was a subdivision?
I don't know, that's what needs to be looked up.
Isn't there pardon me?
Yeah.
Isn't there a time limit too that you can divide a property and then so you have to wait so many years?
It was a lot split.
It was a lot split, not.
Oh, it wasn't just, it was a lot split.
I'd like to keep this part of the hearing at questions from the commissioners toward town staff. Let's leave it at that.
I keep having internet connectivity issues.
Stefan, would you like to borrow my phone and use it as a hotspot?
You know what? That's actually a good idea. I've got a hotspot.
Because that's what I'm using.
So while he's researching that, does someone else have additional questions?
I have an additional question about the timing of when the packet was made available to the public. Because I tried to access it a couple of weeks ago and was told it wasn't available. And if that was the case, I'm concerned that any public access to it may not, have been available since December 27th, when the notice was put into the DCR.
No, it's been available the whole time. So the packet for the meeting wasn't ready, but the thing has always been there.
I think the question is, the application was available.
Yeah, it wasn't. I was told it wasn't when I asked. So that, it's a concern for me that it was available for a long enough period of time for public access.
I entertain a motion for a 5-minute break.
I think it's a really good
Recess,
idea.
so we can have a recess while we're waiting for this research to be done, and then we can reconvene.
I
So-
move that we take a 5-minute break.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We recess until 6:02.
That's why we need the paper copy to go.
Yeah.
And we have it in the office. It's
what we thought may be a adjacent land. Do we know that?
That wasn't what I was researching.
Yeah.
But I wanted to make sure that was cleared up.
So, I compared, the thing I got from, Delta County GIS to the map, and that property does abut. And a notification was not sent to it.
Okay.
So I don't know why it wasn't on the mailing list, but
So there's one property owner that was not properly notified. Okay, thank you. And then the second question. Oh, about.
Is minor subdivision.
This is whether it was minor subdivision, yeah, thank you.
And so, number 11 in our criteria is minor subdivision applicants should not be available more than one time on the same lot or adjacent lots under the same ownership. So the question becomes, was it under the same owner the last time it was subdivided? And so the last sale, according to the assessor's office, was on April 6th of 2012 through a warranty deed. And so that was from the Riverbank neighborhood to the West Elk Landon house.
So there is a change of ownership therefore.
In 2012.
Are there other questions from commissioners?
I have a question. So this project, I remember voting on this back in the day. We voted to annex this property and have a subdivision. So I am kind of curious about that access. At one time, I think the problem I've heard with the lower lot that's for sale that you don't own is that the access is bad. And they are having a hard time having a safe and accessible access to that lower lot. And then I'm wondering when this originally was wasn't there some sort of a flow through access? So it was the highway, but it also connected to Price Road or wherever. So my concern is, so we're, it doesn't matter if it's R2, it doesn't matter if it's a state residential. Right now, we're saying it's R2, although I see it's clear on page 8 of this application, they're expecting to have it zoned to state residential. It's part of their request. It's not, their request wasn't limited to a minor subdivision. But by creating this, this permission to do the subdivision, is the next problem gonna be, well, we just don't have enough access to have that kind of density, so we have to do a state residential. I'm just wondering if we're creating a hardship situation by allowing this without like a little foresight, planning ahead and really planning safe and effective access. So we're gonna have two properties that are really constrained by access at this point, where before it was all gonna be one subdivision and there was gonna be safe and easy access. Let me see. So were there any easements planned originally that we don't know about? And did that all dissolve when they did the last minor subdivision and split the lot in half? Were there any understandings about access and easements at that time, or was it all just planning stage? And I'm asking this because I really would like some research to be done, so we have this information in front of us. I think our what is that called? The MOU with the county about growth. One of the reasons why that subdivision went over there is because the town was concerned about like encouraging a lot of traffic to subdivisions on Minnesota Creek and sending a lot of traffic on the town streets, on residential streets to get to subdivisions up there. So the intent was to put the subdivisions by the highway where they were close to the schools and close to the highway, close to people's, people could commute easily that way without running through the town streets. So in a way, we're kind of undermining the growth plan that the county, we've agreed to with the county by starting to lower the density in that area. You know, even if this property wasn't in town, we'd still get the building permit revenue because anything within 2 miles of the town in that growth area is required to get building permits as potentially, you know, becoming in-town development. But I guess my biggest concern, I think Ms. Patterson said something about it, is the fact that we have this comprehensive plan. I tried to get our zoning map in here before the meeting so we could look at it, but our R2 zoning is disappearing in this town. The R2 zoning that we appear to have, I don't know if Shay and Andrew understood this, but the R2 zoning up in Creek Vista is a conservation easement. This was R2 zoning I mean, we're talking about future growth over the next 50 years. It's not like, let's just solve our problem right now and have ADUs in town. This is 50 more years of growth. We're looking at, or 20 to 50, whatever. We're looking comprehensively about how we plan to grow and what direction we're doing it. And I'm not saying maybe it would be nice to have hobby farms out there for now, but if we create situations that make the access difficult and we create a difficulty where, well, this is just the way we have to keep it because, you know, we didn't plan for a road. I mean, we have that problem up a little bit in Creek Vista. You know, once you finalize things, it's really hard to get things back. It's hard to get your easement. It's hard to get your roads back. So we're doing this comprehensive plan. Shay and Andrew, you know, we're talking, we're wanting money from the state because we need to have more housing density here. We need to have more ability to grow. Shay and Andrew, what were they saying? 100 units, 200 units in the next few years? And then we turn around as a town and start eliminating our R2. What would the state feel when we're asking for money, having our hand out because we need to get land now for housing density when we've just given it away? So I'm not saying that I'm against this, but what I'm against is deciding this tonight. I'd like to finalize our comprehensive plan. We don't have much time left to do it. We've spent a lot of money on Shay and Andrew. We've spent town taxpayer money and we've spent grant money to come up with this housing assessment.
I'm sorry to interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
This part of the hearing is really for commissioner questions.
Yeah.
And our deliberations
Okay,
are coming
I'm
later,
sorry.
so let me make a.
Okay, so let me go back to the
Your
question.
comments are well thought.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for interrupting me. So my questions are, the access. I mean, I really wish we could go back and find what their original plan was for access for this whole area. I know we're incrementally chopping it up into pieces so I'm kind of curious about this. I'm a little concerned about the change of zoning because it was clear to me and I was prepared. You know, I spent time and I didn't have a lot of time to look at this either. I mean, because of work, but I spent time going over state residential zoning and what it meant. And I could have spent more time on other things had I known that that section was going to be off the table. And I don't see how we can just arbitrarily decide that we're not going to contemplate that because it was in the notice and it's in the packet as an intent and a request from the applicant. So I don't know, I might have had a question in the beginning, but I didn't highlight it enough to be able to. I'm asking for a little bit of town work. So knowing exactly how far the town utilities are would be good to know. And where's this thing about, yes, you can have a well in town? I know there was a property out here that was forced to annex. They wanted to put a well in and they were outside of town. And the state told them they couldn't. And I don't know if it was because they were a close enough distance to a water line or not. But I guess instead of just hearing, well, we can, I'd like to know exactly where are we looking when we say we can. And then, yeah, That's it. The minor subdivision was answered.
So do either of the other commissioners have questions?
I do have a question about the road. I have concerns about the road as well and access and is there a way that there can be another exit from that aside from the one that is to Highway 133 and maybe an exit to the south, I believe? That was my one question. The other was, it was there.
Another question. Maybe it's another. Thank you.
No, it was another question and it just, maybe it'll come back in a second.
I know.
It's just
I
like
hope,
me.
I hope it comes back.
I have a question.
Commissioner.
So E1, from what I read in the packet, it did allow for ADUs or since it's would be used as a quasi farming type situation. Does it include like worker housing or? I did see where it said it was an ADU, so I guess my question is, does that really make a difference, changing it from E1 to R2 or back?
So how does that zoning affect the ability to have an ADU?
It's confusing.
Yeah, and again, these are two separate issues, and the planning commission doesn't change zoning. That's strictly a decision for the board of trustees. So that's why I'm saying they make recommendations for rezoning, but they don't actually make the change. That's why I'm saying two separate issues. I didn't review the public notice. That's, that was others. But they are two very separate issues. And so we're looking at a subdivision. And I think that the questions on access are very good, considering that an exit to the south would traverse through a completely separate property owner who has nothing to do with this situation, that is looking to develop something completely different. So I think that some of those questions that we have for access have been answered by working very closely with the fire chief to make sure that emergency access is still considered. So as far as, and also working with CDOT to have a driveway cut or a road cut along Highway 133. I think those were the considerations that this planning commission should contemplate. As far as any sort of rezoning, again, separate issue, needs to go to the board of trustees.
So that's my other question then, is what is the process then for zoning? If we're not going to be looking at zoning at the planning commission tonight, what is the process to look at zoning if planning commission is not involved in it?
Yeah, and so I wanted to go back to like what the plan commission's rules were. Let me pull it up.
The planning and zoning commission. Yeah.
That's what I want to see, because there were general conditions, and one of them. Okay, this was 2/6/20. This 2/6/26, to have all other duties and powers incidental to the above and any and all powers and duties set out by state statute, except that nothing herein shall permit the planning commission to make amendments or changes in the zoning of the town, such powers expressly being preserved by the board of trustees. So the planning commission can recommend planning zoning amendments, but cannot take action on that. So again, that would still go through a public hearing process at the board of trustees.
So then tonight, if we are not discussing zoning at all, would we bring this back in another planning commission meeting to discuss the zoning issues separate from the minor subdivision issue? Because it seems to me that the minor subdivision issue is tied very closely to the zoning issue.
Yeah, and so number 3 of the under 2/6/20 purpose is to study and recommend to the board of trustees amendments to the zoning map of the town.
Oh, so it's not to make decisions on parcels? Zoning parcels?
Correct.
Oh,
And I believe the intent of that is to avoid spot zoning.
So are there any other questions from the commissioners?
What was it? Oh, yeah. So these wells what was the state, are they looking at a certain amount of use? When the wells are being applied for? Is there a certain number of households they're allowing the wells to serve, or someone we ask about? So what kind of density? How many households are the wells allowed to serve?
So the system was designed, the augmentation plan for 6 homes.
And we are producing a fair bit of water.
60 gallons a minute, which is the conservative estimate. Well, folks.
So that means there is no ability to have ADUs or other houses on the property other than what they're allowing you for. So you're saying 3 properties with the potential for 6 houses.
So far, the water appears to be more than adequate.
I think it's important to point out that when we did the testing for the flow rate, it was done in February.
Yeah.
Not during irrigation season.
They purposely,
We have a lot more water coming off of Pekin Mesa, as everyone knows. It runs right down through the properties into the river. So that was pretty accurate flow.
If there's no additional questions from the commissioners, I'd like to close the public hearing and turn the matter over to the planning commission for consideration of a resolution based on the agenda. I'm sorry?
if possible, I'd like to make one statement after listening to the conversation.
Commissioner Steelman.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
And that's simply
To the podium, please.
Sure. Simply, we considered the estate zoning, but R2 would also suffice. But we felt because it was more of an agricultural property and the estate zoning was available, we wanted it to be considered, not that it's required from our end.
Thank you. So the question before the commissioner is first of all, whether you're going to approve the split of the lot and whether you feel equipped and able to make a decision about the split of the lot. So I think that's the first item that we should be going on. Commissioners should discuss the application, noting attributes that support the determination to approve or deny the application in accordance with applicable provisions of the town code. So it's now open for commissioner deliberation.
Well, it seems, at least to me, it seems like it meets all requirements of the town code to be able to split this lot into, 3 lots?
Yeah.
Crosses all the i's and dots all the t's. So as far as that goes, absolutely. It meets the application. As far as, the bigger planning issue for 50 years from now. Again, having mixed density units throughout the town is not a bad thing. Having different kind of neighborhoods that run through the town, it's not a bad thing. I mean, it adds variety to the town, and diversity is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. We don't want it all uniform. So having some R2 and some R1 and some different kind of things, I think this makes the town more viable and will last longer if you have more diversity than if it's all just one thing. So changing this to have, little farm plots on it, and a cow and a horse and a chicken would be good. I think that'd be kind of fun, actually.
Maybe even turkeys.
Maybe a duck. Maybe a duck.
Commissioner Watson.
No, not aside from the concerns
All right.
no, but I mean, I'm still uncomfortable with the fact that we're taking higher density out of circulation, the potential for that. And I don't know. I mean, once you start selling 3 lots, I mean, it's just like, then they can be split again, but I'm concerned about that access, and would it really support higher density? I don't know. I need a little bit more, I'd like to hear a little bit more of a review of that from our town staff. And I don't think we have that right now.
So you're feeling not adequate.
Yeah, because it's gonna be all private, and how can you you know, how can you make them pave it, for instance, if there's like dust impacts and noise impacts from the crunching of gravel, and I don't know, I feel a little uncomfortable with it, that's all.
Thank you. Through the chair, can I address a couple of concerns?
Let me finish with the commissioners first, so, Commissioner Howell.
I just had the question about did you find any information on the minor subdivision versus?
Yeah, so it had transferred ownership, and so that 11th criteria was moot. So this can be a minor subdivision, but I do want to address, I'll wait, if you have any more questions.
So this is your time for any deliberations, thoughts, what you might
Yeah,
add.
I'd like to. Town manager.
So if this goes through a split again, let's say they want to continue to increase density, there would have to be a major subdivision. We have to go through those steps to be able to do that, regardless of transferring ownership. So because this has been split, now twice, it would, a third time, there would be a trigger for a major subdivision. You have to go through that process. As far as building and design standards are concerned, considering they would still have to get a development or a building permit from the town separate from this process. They would have to follow our design and build standards. That's just the way it has to be. As far as contemplating comprehensive plans, the appropriate mechanism for doing anything while we're in the middle of a comprehensive or master plan review would have been to put a moratorium on any development. And so since there isn't a moratorium on any development, we have to go by what has been approved. And that being said, the 1996 comprehensive plan would be contemplated. And in that, the major goals out of that land use and development section for that comprehensive plan were to maintain rural and agricultural setting of community, maintain a small community closeness, preserve the character of downtown, monitor growth and encourage controls on quality and character, preserve and protect open spaces in the river corridor, and restrict forces which could impact the natural beauty of the area. Looking at things like the land use development first criteria, it would be develop and maintain zoning classifications which provide for a range of uses that clearly specify the allowable use of property within the town boundaries. And here's where it's specific to Highway 133. Land use development goal number 2, encourage the town of Hotchkiss and Delta County to maintain the agricultural character and rural setting along State Highway 133 between Hotchkiss and Paonia. So, looking at this existing comprehensive plan, a subdivision like this would fit that criteria. It would even fit rezoning down the road, but again, not that kind of discussion tonight. So, and then LUD 5 is continue agricultural use of land whenever possible.
There's no discussion.
Yeah, so there was the Highway 133 overlay. Is this within the highway, that came after the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, and this is with it.
So this is within it, and, okay. So I mean, I don't know, I do have a concern though, and I did forget to bring this up, that it wasn't properly noticed to all the homeowners. And, that's a concern, isn't it? The fact that we failed proper noticing requirements.
So as far as legal notices were concerned, it was going off of a 200-foot radius from the property line. All of those adjacent property owners were notified through a certified mail letter, and then it was also noticed within the newspaper for 4 weeks, and also posted at town hall, those places that were established by the town's resolution as appropriate places for. So, what's that? And it was also posted at the property as required by our local.
So if there's no further discussion by the planning commission, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we accept the subdivision.
Right, there's a motion that's been made to accept the subdivision. Is there a second?
Is this open for discussion first before a second?
If we don't get a second.
Right.
Why discuss it? So it doesn't sound like we're gonna have a second to that motion, so I will open it for further discussion among the commissioners.
And our town administrator, I guess.
And call on town staff for comments.
Yeah, so if this were to be contemplated for approval as a subdivision, there ought to be conditions put in place. So it shouldn't just be approved. There should be specific criteria that also need to be met. And one of those biggest issues that came out tonight was your access to these new splits. That should be a condition that I would recommend should absolutely be there. The other two conditions or criteria should, in my opinion, should be also obtaining a general use well permit before any sort of sales happens. Also, receiving engineered plans for that domestic well water system. So those criteria, there's three now, and then one of the criteria that our applicants put in was HOA guidelines. And so having those four criteria in place, I think would be a good conditional approval.
Could you please repeat the first one?
Yeah, so having access agreements in place. Let me get the right wording for that. So a conditional approval on the condition that the seller grant the appropriate access easements upon sale of the subject lots. Obtaining a general use well permit. Engineered plans for the domestic well water system and delivery plan to each lot. And establishing HOA guidelines all prior to the sale of any lots.
So that's a much more complicated motion.
Yes, that's a much more complicated motion. I
But that
like
would
that
be,
much better.
that would be if the commissioners are thinking they want
Right,
to go in
yeah,
that motion, because
that's-
the motion to approve already failed.
Right.
So is there going to be a second try on that?
I think you have a question from your commissioners.
So. Okay, never mind, this was under a state residential, you have to have a plan for irrigation, but since we're not doing.
So does Commissioner Bachman want to try to make a background, another stab at a motion?
I can make another stab at a motion. You can fill in missing parts if I'm missing any, okay? Town Administrator Ben?
I can try.
Okay. I would move that we do conditional approval of the application for minor subdivision property at 41 Highway 133 with the formulation of an access agreement. Is that
On the sale.
upon the sale of the properties, that they obtain a general use well permit, that they have engineering plans for the domestic water system, and develop HOA guidelines before the sale. That would-
Okay, a motion's been made that was quite lengthy and difficult, but is there a second to that motion? Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded to approve the subdivision under the conditions that the access agreement is in force on any sale. That the well is taken care of, engineering plans for domestic water delivery and the HOA. All those in favor?
Aye.
Is that, did you know?
I thought there was one.
No, there were.
No, I did the HOA, that was the vote.
Okay.
So I called for a vote.
Okay,
So we have one nay.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. So the motion passes. Now, on the second item, this has to do with zoning, whether we approve the zoning. I'm a little confused right now. I'd like some guidance from staff on whether we can actually approve zoning or
Or
whether the town
recommend zone.
recommend approval. of zoning.
I recommend a change to the zoning map is what the code says.
And so what you would be contemplating is a recommendation to change the zoning map for this entire R2 area.
But that includes Riverbank then, does it not as well?
It would.
Oh, and
So I see a bunch of shaking heads on that one.
So in order for this, in order for this to actually really be heard, what you can do is, there's three paths forward for this second question. You can either recommend approval for a rezoning for this, this zoning classification. You can recommend denial, or you can punt and send it to the Board of Trustees for a public hearing. So those are the three options.
They have a public hearing anyway.
Correct.
So let me ask you, okay, give us the three recommendations again. The first one was,
You can recommend approval of rezoning for this entire zoning.
so there would be the whole thing.
Correct. You can recommend denial for rezoning for the whole thing. Or you can punt and have no recommendation and have this go to the Board of Trustees for them to hear during the public hearing.
Can I ask a question?
Surely.
So if we're recommending a zoning change, doesn't that trigger its own noticing requirements?
It sure would.
So we can't just, how far from now?
So I guess there's another path forward, right? The subdivision has happened. There can't be any development right now. It's winter. Development would probably happen in spring or summer. We are looking at having a completed comprehensive or master plan June 5th of this year. And in our next meeting, you're going to have a public input session on future land use planning, where zoning at that time could take place. And so you could carve out a new zoning district during that future land use that would follow into the comprehensive plan. So you would have a residential estate and still maintain that R2 zoning for the rest of that zoning area. That's something that could be discussed at your next public hearing for that future land use plan.
So does the commissioner want to make a path forward on this motion regarding this?
Well, I would motion then that we do nothing and that this be taken up by the Board of Trustees as part of the whole master plan.
So we will use the football analogy in front.
Yes.
I do have a question. What's on the public notice for the trustee meeting next week? Does it include rezoning?
It does.
Oh, as for the Board of Trustees meeting.
Yeah.
They could do the same thing.
So if there's.
So
no-
we're just recommending to them that we do this?
No, we're not making it.
Yeah,
We're doing a
we're just
motion
saying
of-
no, but the thing is, they can totally overturn it next week and say, we don't care what you guys
Exactly.
think.
They can.
Exactly, but we're not making a recommendation to them anyway.
Well, then, why not make a recommendation that they wait till June 5th?
That's also an acceptable.
That you want to make, I will rescind my motion if you want to make that motion.
Yeah, let's add that into it.
Well, I'll
Use the
just
same
rescind-
wording, but
No, I'll just rescind my motion and make a motion.
I
So what's
need
the
it in
motion?
writing. No,
Oh,
tell me what.
Oh, all right. I make a motion that we recommend that the Board of Trustees takes up the zoning issue after June 6th.
And to be clear, the first motion died for lack of second.
Or I rescind the first motion.
Yes.
Okay?
so repeat the motion, please.
I make a motion that we recommend to the Board of Trustees, they take the zoning issue up after June 6th.
Is there a second? Okay, there's a motion made and second to take the zoning issue, to recommend to the Board of Trustees that the zoning issue be taken up after the public hearing that is in conjunction with the general plan. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes. Good.
We're good.
Then see if there's no further discussion. See, I think we finished.
No, you need.
We have one more agenda item.
Well, I closed the public hearing.
No, did you close the meeting? close, oh, you did, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so we have one more item on the agenda. This has to do with recommendations to town council regarding the housing needs assessment, housing action plan regarding short-term rentals. And as chair of your commission, I requested that this be put on the agenda. I've heard from the public in town council meetings that urging the town council to continue any kind of momentum toward adopting the plan and making progress toward the plan. So one of the, if you want to call it a quick win on affordable housing that was suggested by our plan was to actually tackle short-term rentals for the town and to bring that forward to the town council and ask them to really start making progress on decisions about short-term rentals.
So we already have tasked Andrew and Shay with writing us a ordinance for that. So they should be in process of writing that ordinance. They have funding for it and should be writing that as we speak.
Do we want to make some recommendations as to what would go into that in terms of regulating STRs?
Well, my personal opinion on that is they are the professionals. They have looked at numerous communities across the state of Colorado and what they have done. And they are going to write an ordinance looking at different communities, bring us something. Now, we can make, we can take stabs at it on our nose, but it seems to me, let's let the professionals write up the draft thing and then we'll look at that and decide if it fits us or not.
Any comments?
Well, the ADU, it's ADUs and
STR.
Yeah,
Mostly
I know
STRs.
STRs, it's kind of synonymous with ADUs in a way, because you have STRs that people just have a piece of property and they don't live here and they rent. You have people who are building ADUs in their yard illegally and renting those out as STRs. And which is kind of problematic with the current status of the water moratorium and not understanding how it all ties together. So it's, and it just kind of keeps happening. And the minute you say that we're tackling STRs and we're gonna allow them, all of a sudden the ADUs are gonna be popping up because people in this town, they hear what they wanna hear and they say all of a sudden they think they can do it. But I mean, talking about what the range of STRs are is really important. And I don't know if Shay and Andrew are lining that out. I mean, we have this problem where, people are just buying up houses and they don't live here. And that's completely separate from, so and people wanting to do just a micro unit. It's really a complicated thing. And then what we need to hear too is when Leslie was here, she said there was, it's very new as far as Colorado law, and they, what was it? Was it DOLA was saying, or was it one of the agencies were saying that Colorado law considers STRs to be housing and you can't discriminate against housing.
That's HOA. It's an HOA.
It's HOA? Well, no, it had to do with short-term rentals.
Yeah.
Okay.
Within an HOA. I mean, the HOA was contesting
Okay.
some of these rulings.
Okay. So there's a lot still that so we have to work with our attorney on that too.
Right, absolutely. That's why it needs to be an ordinance. Well, what we could do is we could ask Shay and Andrew to give us an update as to where they are on that and what their timeline is for delivering this ordinance.
So my understanding with what they wrote up is they gave us kind of some recommendations and then different links to look at what different towns were doing, and then to kind of put the ball in our court to say, well, what of those resonated in, and so we have no say until they.
Right. Well, that's when we task them back to write us a draft order.
Could I make a comment?
Yeah.
Okay, let me tell you why I put this on. Shay and Andrew are experts and they do know how to do a code, but there's also a philosophy about what you want to see in town. For instance, when I did a lot of business travel, this was a decade ago, Airbnb was fairly new and I would stay in those a lot of times. And what I found is the host was there. They would orient me to the place. They would let me know about the community I was in. And it was a very community-centered, friendly kind of welcoming into the area. What I've been seeing is out-of-town ownership, management companies running the place, and you come in with a door code and you have a notebook and you walk into IKEA. That is not Paonia. So what, at least in my experience, that's not Paonia. So to me, Andrew and Shay need guidance about what we'd like to see in the STRs, not just let the experts figure it out, but this is what Paonia means to us. This is what we'd like to see happen in Paonia. And this is how we'd like to see the regulations for STRs go. For instance, owner occupied could be one thing that could shut down a lot of this out of town. Because one thing that concerns me about that is you're extracting money out of our community, out of town. We want to extract money into town. So people are having a hard time affording a house in town. If they're allowed to do ADU and they own it and they live there, that helps them make their payments. So those are the kind of issues I think that come up when we're talking about STRs, that you can't just leave to the experts. You as a group have to decide, what do we really want to see in the community?
But I think that came out loud and clear in the housing needs assessment.
But then there are specifics, like, they mentioned we can have registration and, there can be excise tax and, I wrote out a bunch of them because I really went through that and it was like, okay, you can do all these things. You can have an excise tax of 8% and you're gonna have a ballot initiative or not,
You have to have.
I mean, we would have to because of being unincorporated, but, I don't know, I just thought maybe it would be good if we don't do it within the planning commission that we sit in a meeting with them and talk about, here's what we'd like, here are things that seem appropriate for Paonia. And, just so they don't get left out, and we're not going back and forth a ton of times.
But what I was hoping by making this agenda item is that the planning commission could at least make some recommendations to town council to help guide them in how they're moving forward short term.
I would like to see where Shay and Andrew are in the whole process.
Can I? So two points that I want to make really quick. Having preliminary discussions with Shay and Andrew about short-term rentals. While I understand the approach to say that it has to be owner occupying, there was an issue with property rights that they were working through. And so the solution they came up with was selling a finite amount of licenses, similar to what we have with our marijuana licenses. Within that finite amount of licenses, preference goes to residents of town who may own a property that they want to rent out as a short-term rental. And there's no law that says you have to advertise the availability of licenses. So that was one of the solutions they were working towards. The second thing I want to say is I've been holding on to one provision of our code that defines a rental as 30 days or longer. And so short-term rentals right now by our code are prohibited, and you can't do them. Now, I know that there are some organizations that may rent properties in town, but as that, let's say it's, say the Blue Sage wanted to rent for a month or have access to a short-term rental for a month to bring in artists. That's the way they're getting around it, is they're renting something for a month, even though they might have somebody in it for 4 or 5 days. And there's nonprofits that are doing that throughout town. Now there are, and I'm not saying that they're not just, violating our ordinances, because they are. There's quite a few short-term rentals that are out there. And so, but when somebody is asked for a zoning verification, and they happen to be a resort management company from Texas, my answer is you can't have a short-term rental under this current code. So rentals are deemed 30 days or longer.
Do
Do
we
we
know?
need
how far-
guidance to the commission on what you would suggest that we do, vis-a-vis the council at this point?
I think we have a draft ordinance from Shay and Andrew, but one of the things that I worked with from DOLA was changing the grant contract to allow for that additional funding that we didn't use to go towards writing these ordinances. And so we can start doing that. I know you heard earlier today from our Phoenix Rising group that they want to have additional hours. Well, that's been allocated through that grant program, a separate grant.
I think we need a definition of short-term rental, because I know there's some people who rent rooms short-term, and that's not the same as a rental. It's not the same thing, but it's an accessory use in our code. And I'm almost thinking that any short-term rental is a business. And would it be by special review? Where, neighbors can have a say in it?
Sure.
Say, it's like, wow, and maybe, I don't know, would it always go with the land, or would the special review be just for that owner?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so that was some of the things that were contemplated. I think you're on the right track. Is you define what a short-term rental is, and you set the process for which a license can be applied for. So if it has to go through the same process as, say, a marijuana license, you've got public hearings, there's notices, and then there's that set finite amount of licenses that are available. And then in addition to that, they have to be renewed every year. So it's not something that can just transfer with the land. It's something that is owner specific. And then if they fail to register or renew their license, that's now a license that's available to anyone.
So then you also have the scenario where you have, it's a business use of the property, but the owner doesn't live there, so it still is R1. But then if you have someone adding use to their property and like adding a second building, then all of a sudden we come into the water tap issues. And I know as a single property owner that is responsible fully for my bill, I'd hate to see myself subsidizing people who can make money off their property without paying more for water, paying base rates and all that. So there are all these like complicated issues in there, and I don't know, hopefully Shay and Andrew are aware of all this, the unique issues here. And then we really do need to fix the zoning code first before we start allowing this, because steep slopes development is not in the current zoning code. There's some things that were taken out that we really do need to talk about. Also, people should be able to maintain their backyards for gardens if they want. And I'd hate to see this town become like Observatory Park, in Denver, Platt Park, where they're just McMansions. The whole lot is getting filled up. That's another thing, Stefan. I will bring up again 16-3-20, table 16-1 of our code. There's the minimum lot coverage for estate residential is 20%. You have to fill 20% of your estate residential lot with a building. And in town for R1, it's 30%. That was a Scrivener error when the code company wrote that up. Our old original code said maximum. And that needs to be changed. There are things that need to be changed and put into place before we start allowing for this.
Yeah, and I got good news. So we did receive a grant for our code, for our comprehensive code rewrite. I would caution really starting that before a comprehensive plan is completely finished. We still have to go out for an RFQ. We still have to do all of that. And I guess somebody can start that process while we're going through that, because there's, like you said, I have never heard of a minimum lot coverage before. It's always been a maximum lot coverage. So that's really Paonia unique. And, that's something that really needs to be addressed. And I'm certain that with our code rewrite, those kinds of things will be
Little mistakes.
yeah.
I was just wishing we could restore our code to the way it was before it got changed with Ken Knight, because we gutted the zoning code. And if we could just start back to what the original zoning code was before that change in 2018, it might make it cheaper for a company to come in and do their changes. I don't know, maybe not,
Yeah,
unless they want to do a complete rewrite.
They're doing it.
I'll tell you, if you put that on my plate, I will probably run. So we're in the middle of 2 audits. We've got about 7 different massive capital improvement projects that are happening this year alone. I have the time to review changes that are being done, but I don't have the time to specifically tackle each one of them. I guess you could put it on my plate and just know that it will be about 4 years before I have it. I'm being serious with
It
that one.
seems so easy to take them out and put them in the building code. I don't know why we can't just bounce them back.
In the interest of making this meeting not last past 7 o'clock, I'd like to suggest that we ask for a written or in-person update from Andrew and Shay at our next planning meeting. And I don't want to capitalize on their time to have them actually make the trip over here to do a presentation. If they could write a short update about their progress. Those SPRs. This would keep. That's for the planning commission. Next meeting, there could just be a couple paragraphs in the packet to let us know that we're still making some progress toward.
And maybe a draft.
Yeah. If they can go that far.
If they-
I want to,
It's
they charge for their time, rightly so. And so I want to make sure it's used for the best interest of the town. So anything else from the commissioners? I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
You can make a motion, Dave.
I didn't know I could.
Yes,
I'd
in
like
the
to-
planning commission, you can.
That's nice. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. In a second. All in favor? And thanks for members of the public that can wade through this for 2 hours. Thank you. Thank you guys for doing that.
Thank you, Richard, for
Thanks,
showing
Richard.
up and talking. It's really nice. Raised some good points.
I don't know if we got to all of them. I'm sorry about that. 511.